This Pokemon Pocket genius goes by the gamer tag Randomways.
I make sure that I know every possible thing that could happen and choose the highest probability of winning.
And Randomways is a Pokemon Pocket tournament champion who can win any game no matter what, laughing in the face of bad luck, bad coin flips, or bad RNG.
I don't think I had a single game that didn't have a decision that influenced the game. There was never a situation where I was like, oh, there's nothing I can do. This is all just all heads, and I lost. That never happened in any of my games.
If you're tired of getting dunked on by Misties, Celebes, and overall bad draw luck, then hopefully these nuggets of wisdom from a champion player can help your PvP game as much as it helped mine. This is the Random Ways Pocket Champion interview. Number one. All right, before we get started, you told me that your daughter does some Pokemon art. Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah, she actually just gave me this last week. She colored this masterpiece in school featuring Pikachu,
So
by the
good.
way, the winner of the tournament. So
That
in
is
fact,
so
she
good.
uh, she was the one who chose my deck list for this week. She said, I asked her what I should play, and she said Pikachu, of course. So
That Pikachu list, I mean, it took down two of the largest tournaments this weekend, back to back. Incredible run by that deck.
Yeah, it did so well. I mean, it does seem like it's back to being the reigning champ Pikachu here. That Electabuzz, they're running Zebstrika, they know their exact game plan, and they've had a couple of months now to learn how to play Pikachu and know how to play it correctly.
This is the deck created by Prelox that Random Ways used to win the Ursiiday Tournament, one of the biggest pocket tournaments on Limitless right now.
I did. So the winner of the first tournament, PLL, was Prelux, and he was actually my first round opponent. But we did have mirror deck lists. So
Alright, so Electabuzz was a really interesting pick. I think even Nothing But Bangers, a big community member in PLL and one of the casters of the Ursiiday tournament, was saying that he didn't think Electabuzz was a good pick, and yet it won you some games. What made you decide to give up Zapdos EX, like one of the best Pokemon in the meta, for a rogue random selection like Electabuzz?
So Zapdos is definitely really strong in a few matchups in particular, like Mewtwo and Celebi. Uh, but it suffers in some of the other matchups, like Charizard, the Fighting Toolbox decks, and Gyarados. And I really wanted to be geared to beat Gyarados because I figured it'd be a large part of the metagame. And it was the second most played deck. And I did play against Gyarados 3 times, I believe, in the round of 10. So having Electabuzz out to be able to snipe Magikarps in addition to the Zebstrika really helped. And something I noticed when using Electabuzz, I haven't actually used Electabuzz in the past. I've used Zapdos generally. I noticed that Pikachu plus Electabuzz is a nice 130 breakpoint for things like Mew and Celebi if they don't have heals or blue. So it does actually help. And in fact, I think in the final game of the final round, Electabuzz was critical in getting the last point against a benched Mew if they had a blue. So even Zebstrika wouldn't have guaranteed the win there. Maybe not an all-star card. I would say the one of Dedenne is more important, but it was important in a few of the games, definitely.
Den 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 den. So Dedenne is a card I really liked from Mythical Island. Even though it doesn't do a lot of damage, it's a 1 energy potential paralyze. But still, that's a whole energy to waste on a 50% chance to stall your opponent. Was Dedenne really useful for you in the tournament, or did it fall flat?
It did a great job. So if anyone's played the original Pokemon TCG way back in the day, there was a basic called Lickitung, ended up being one of the best stall cards of all time. There are several times, right? We only have 3 points that you can get. There are several times where you need to reach a certain breakpoint of damage, and the only way to do it is to get maybe 2 or 3 heads off to Dene. And having the ability to do that lets you potentially win a game that would be a loss if any other Pokemon were in that position. And people were using Pinnerchin in the past, but 2 energy is a lot to commit. Generally, with these aggro decks, you want shorter games, so maybe you'll get 6 or 7 energy total throughout the whole game. So you really can't devote 2 energy even if it is more damage. And surprisingly, 10 damage is low, but in a lot of the matchups that are important, like Aerodactyl, for instance, Dedenne plus Pikachu 2-shot. So you just need the stun plus a Pikachu hit. Dedenne can also one-shot Magikarp. So, or 2-shot Farfetch'd. So there are several things that it does actually kill on its own, which is great. So I would say he was the most important flex card of the three: Zapdos, Dedenne, and Electabuzz.
Oh wow, that's so cool. Even better than Zapdos.
Yes, Zapdos is critical basically only in Mewtwo and can be a way to win Celebi. I would say Celebi is definitely the worst matchup. Celebi with Executor.
It's executing time.
Celebi on its own isn't that bad, but Celebi with Executor is really, really difficult to beat. And Zapdos helps there. And Zapdos definitely helps against Mewtwo, as we saw. But most of the time, it's just there to tank. And if you're tanking with an aggro deck, you're probably not doing it correctly. You want to be hitting with Zepstrika and Pika 90% of the time early on. So you don't really want Zapdos out there in the front.
Gyarados and Greninja. And I think you've mentioned them before. They're like super meta right now. Gyarados is one of the most powerfully X Pokemon in the game because you get it online, it stops you from building energy, and then you just don't have the tools to fight it.
Yeah, so it's kind of silly. I wouldn't even call Gyarados meta. There's this situation that happens in a lot of games where the presence of something warps the meta to such a degree that it is meta, like it's meta warping, but it's not good. I don't think Gyarados has won a single big tournament. I could be wrong about that, but you see its effects regardless. You see it in Zepstrika Pika being the premier Pikachu deck. You see it in Hitmonlee being in every fighting deck. And I would argue that maybe those cards aren't the best again in other matchups. But Gyarados basically gatekeeps every other form of Pikachu or fighting. It's good against Mewtwo and Celebi. So, but it'll never win because if it ever matches against some of these harder matchups like Pikachu, I think it's got like a 13 or 14, maybe 20% win rate against it. So you basically have to avoid all of the Pikachu decks, and that's not going to happen. So I don't. Gyarados is strong, but I don't think it's built perfectly right now. I think something like Blue needs to be included to try to block Zepstrika on Magikarp, because at this point it's really hard to play against, and I'm sure my Gyarados opponents can attest to that.
The presence of Gyarados forces everyone else to play slightly weaker cards that counter Gyarados, thus making Gyarados unable to win, and the other decks weaker, making there less Gyarados, even though it's all caused by Gyarados.
Yeah, so the for any Magic players, this happens all the time. There are these graveyard-based decks that are incredibly powerful and can win consistently turn 2 or 3, but everyone sideboards against them because they're so strong, and you never see them win because of that. And I think Gyarados fills a niche kind of like that. It's an incredibly powerful deck, but it's very weak to bench sniping currently. And they have to find a way to play around that if they want to end up winning big tournaments.
So it's sort of like Shed Ninja in the main games, where in theory this could be an invincible Pokemon, but every team has something to kill it in one shot, and so no one runs Shed Ninja.
Exactly.
Wow, that was a really amazing take. I'm learning a lot here. What do you do if you, while playing the Pikachu deck, run into a Misty player? Like, did you have to defeat a Misty player who just got like a bajillion energy from Misty?
I played against 2 Misty players that were Gyarados, and I didn't have to worry about it because they couldn't play their Magikarps. And Misty and Greninja isn't that important. And I played against one Misty player that was a Starmie variant, and I think they did get a Starmie on turn 2, but Pikachu can still deal with that pretty easily. Obviously, there are games where if someone goes Articuno 3 heads turn 1, it's probably your game to lose, but not necessarily. Cards like Sabrina are good late game, obviously, to get the last point, but they're also good early game to force swaps so that energy isn't exactly where it needs to be. So you can definitely play around, do some energy manipulation with some of the trainers. So I wasn't ever afraid against to go against the Misty. Even the possibility of multiple heads turn 1.
All right. Bold statement. I like it.
Well, think of it this way, right? I can also, if they get turn 1 Articuno, 3 heads, one shot a person, and then I play Dedenne and get 3 heads, I'm just as lucky as they are. They just took 90 damage on Articuno without doing anything. Like, you know what I mean? I also have an ability to get incredibly lucky.
That's, oh my goodness, more than 90 damage. I didn't even think about this until you said it, but if Dende attacked Articuno 3 times and got heads 3 times, you would do 90 damage and then get to switch in something else and hit it again.
Exactly, yeah. So it kind of counters their luck with my luck.
Wow, comparing Dedenne to Misty is insane, and now I'm starting to see how good Dedenne is. It took that comparison for it to click in my head. That is so cool. All right.
I like them. It's kind of the reason I think too that the Eevee with continuous stomps or whatever it's called that can flip heads. I've had a Moltres die to that, and I'm like, this card's insane. It's just that there are no good Eevee variants really right now. So there is an interesting take on Pikachu EX that doesn't play Pikachu and instead plays Eevee and Jolteon. And then it allows you to use things like Mew. I think Mew is better than Zapdos because Mew guarantees kills on the things that you need Zapdos to be lucky on, like Charizard or Mewtwo. And even Celebi. And I would rather Zapdos be a Mew, honestly, in 90% of the matchups that I play it in. So if you're using Jolteon and Eevee, that's actually kind of cool. You obviously can't play Eevee and Pikachu. That is a Nombo.
Right, because if you play Eevee or Mew on the bench, then Pikachu loses power and can't do its burst.
Exactly, yeah. So that is the weakness, I think, of Pikachu EX, is that you're forced to only play electric Pokemon, and there are definitely good flex options right now that are not electric, like Tauros or Mew, or even things like Farfetch'd. Farfetch'd should be great in this deck, but you can't play Farfetch'd because of Pikachu.
All right, you're giving me some ideas for my next tournament deck here. I'll keep that in mind. Maybe try like a little Jolteon or something.
Yeah, I think the last Ursi I did, I was already in PLL and I was doing their top cut. So I just put together an electric Pidgeot deck with Zebstrika. I think I went 3-3 or something and dropped, but I always like trying rogue things like that just to see if it'll work. This is, I think, my first time playing a real meta, like top 3 deck.
So your first time playing a meta top 3 deck, and you win the tournament.
Yeah, it was kind of unexpected. I was just kind of playing at the side, and I was like, oh, I'm actually doing pretty well. Oh, there's the top cut. And I was like, oh, I'm playing against the PLL winner with his own deck. That's probably not a good sign. And then I beat him, and then I had 2 fighting decks back to back, and another mirror. So like the top cut, I probably had one of the hardest routes because it was multiple mirror matches and my worst matchup, or maybe second worst matchup in the fighting decks.
So you beat the creator of this deck.
Yes.
All right, I've got one last question for you. So one of the top comments I get on every single video: this game is RNG, it's all luck, there's no skill involved. You've consistently placed in top cuts in tournaments. You've won a tournament. You had to beat how many people to get to the championship? How do you get around, like, what skills do you use that most people don't even realize are there? How do you get around the bad luck? What would you say to people who say it's all random? Randomways.
You make your own luck. So you definitely need to play to your outs always. And this game undoubtedly has more luck than something like Magic or Hearthstone. I would say it has just as much luck as Yu-Gi-Oh! In that turn order is super important in Yu-Gi-Oh! And pretty much determines who wins. I would say that anything with coin flips is inherently luck-based, but at the same time, you can make decisions in games that influence. I don't think I had a single game that didn't have a decision that influenced the game. There was never a situation where I was like, oh, there's nothing I can do. This is all just all heads, and I lost. Like, that never happened in any of my games for this tournament. I have had games like that, but I don't believe that happened in this tournament. So I wouldn't say that this game is all luck. I also was a really good Hearthstone and Magic player, so I have quite a bit of tournament winnings in other card games. If you're good at card games, you'll be good at this game. Maybe even better because you'll know how to play to your outs when other people generally won't.
So, by play to your outs, this is something I think you do that I don't see most players do. I don't even do this. I remember watching you in the finals, and instead of attacking, you decided to retreat. And then you'd retreat again. And even though you're playing an aggressive deck, you'd switch your Pokemon around, stall a little bit. Do you just see options and predict futures that the rest of us are missing? Because if it were me, I would go Zapdos, attack, attack again. Oh darn, you're knocked out. Next Pokemon.
Yeah, so the final round, there was a situation, and you could see it in the chat, right? People were stating that I should have just attacked the Mew with Zapdos. I think it was the final attack of the game.
On this coin flip here, and
Yeah.
even securing one, that's going to put them in range of Zebstrika, and it's not like
Sure.
they can attack for 150. So yeah, I mean, gonna need some luck on the coin flip, and then hopefully, you know, they're able to close the game out with some good coin flips of their own.
Agreed.
Oh, you know what? They're not even going to give them the opportunity. They're going to
Oh.
retreat.
That's probably the better choice, because now Electabuzz is set up to finish off next turn. Oh no, did we just get checkmated?
But I switched to Zebstrika and Giovanni to do 40 to the Mew. And I played the Giovanni to play around blue, right? So if my opponent blued next turn, I wouldn't have been able to finish the bench Pokemon. So then I'd have the Electabuzz to kill it. So I always have my opponent's deck list pulled up. I have good relaxing music playing, and I just calculate everything that could happen and choose the best option. Sometimes it bites me in the butt, right? There was a game I played earlier where I almost ran out of time and wasn't able to do an attack, but I make sure that I know every possible thing that could happen and choose the highest probability of winning action. Even if it's only a few percent, I'll always choose the best. I hope. I hope I'm making those calculations correctly.
And I feel like the rest of us are like, you know, the character on the TV saying, Pikachu, dive right in and attack. And you're playing 5D chess and calculating every opportunity. One thing that really struck me is you said play to your outs. Is that like the Dendeni thing you were talking about? Like, there's always a chance of paralyzing.
Oh, yeah. And you'll see things that, for instance, don't fill up your board with basics. If your opponent's not playing red card, there's no reason to play your cards, your basic Pokemon. So if you, for instance, fill up your board on turn 1 for no reason, and then you later draw your Dedenne, then you don't even have that option to paralyze people. So you always want to make sure that your current actions aren't affecting your future possibilities. And that's a key thing, is knowing not to fill up your board. Knowing if you put like a Pikachu out to start putting energy on it, you also have to remember to play around their Sabrina. So play something that can tank. Like, just always make sure you know what your opponent could do and know how that could affect the future.
Really good advice. You mentioned red card. This has been a huge debate in the community. Should you use red card? And for a while, red card was in every tournament winner's deck. But this deck doesn't have red card at all. Do you think red card is worth including in a deck? Or not?
I think currently probably not. I think the only reason that red card was indexed before this was because there weren't enough options for cards to include. I don't think it is a good card, and I don't even think if you play it correctly it is a good card. I'm not going to say it won't win games. It's better than something like Pokedex, which basically does nothing. Red carding your opponent turn 1 can be really good because they essentially get -1 card if they don't play multiple basics out. So, and there are definitely decks that red card helps, like Pidgeot EX, for instance, probably likes red card because if they're not playing their basics, then red card's good against it, and if they are, then Pidgeotty X is good against it, right? But I mean, red card is essentially like the Monty Hall problem, where you're giving your opponent the ability to shuffle cards that they didn't want and then potentially draw cards that they did want. Because if they have cards in their hand, they're probably not using them generally. But I don't want to get into that debate too much. I don't use red card. I think someone proved mathematically it was not a good card. I didn't get into it. I don't think I'll play it ever again unless there's a really good reason to.
Okay. Do you believe do you believe that Pokemon such as Drudgeon, Weezing, Pokemon that kind of stall and help you build your main strategy, do you believe they should be referred to as engines?
No, I wouldn't call them engines. I think that's kind of an interesting question. I would say like Koga plus Weezing is technically an engine because it allows you to facilitate your strategy behind something that's a combo, and that's usually how you refer to as engines. I don't know if Pokemon has a traditional like engine that you would refer to in another card game right now. But they don't really, I don't know, they just kind of stall, right? It's not like they're generating value for you over time. Um, like what is his name? Shoutout, the little bird.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is an engine in some respects, right? Because he single-handedly draws through your deck. I guess that would be the closest thing to an engine right now. Like if you use Shoutout and a bunch of trainers and fossils and stuff to cycle through your deck really quickly.
Do you have any plans for the next tournament? And congrats on your win, by the way.
Hopefully I can win another one.
Yeah.
Except next week I'll probably just play like it kind of felt dirty playing Pikachu. You know what I mean? Like you just play rogue, like it's way more fun to play rogue decks and just try to win with something unique or new, like the Volcarona list that got top 8, I think it was. Like I think that's really cool. There was like a Greninja list with fighting Pokemon that looked really fun to play. I like those more interesting off the wall kind of things. They're even winning's nice, but having fun's the key, right?
And I guess just one last thing. Would you mind showing us that awesome picture one last time?
Oh yeah, the beautiful the artwork.
A huge shout out to the Ursiiday Tournament community and the PLL Pokemon Pocket Tournament community. Biggest tournaments you can find, awesome folks. I highly recommend anyone interested in PvP check them out. And thanks to everybody who showed up in this video, one way or another. Thanks again, Randomways, for letting me do this, and I'll catch you all later.